Welcome to the First Right Podcast, your weekly conservative news show brought to you by Restoration PAC. I'm Doug Truax, founder and president of Restoration PAC. This week, we've got some staff here on Restoration PAC on the show. We have our executive director, John Pearman, and our director of communications, Dan Curry, and we are going to talk about the state of the race, which is all-consuming at this point. So, guys, welcome to the show. Well, let's jump in here. So let's look at last year. The good old days of how 2016 went. You can see how it played out, and we were all hoping for something like that, which...
Trump won in 2016?
Yeah, big time.
Okay,
big
yeah.
time.
I wasn't sure that they'd called it yet at AP.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So.
Or if anybody in D.C. was acting like it. All right. Okay, so then let's go to where we are now.
Yeah, before we go, if we could just go back to the other one real quick. I just want to, see the red states at the top. These are the key things to look at here are obviously Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were red in 2016, as was obviously Arizona. So if we go to the next slide, then you'll see some of these states are looking blue on this particular map. That's one of the key difference areas in case you've been living in a cave or under a rock or just tuning this out. So what we're talking about today, and we're now on the third day after voting began here, is undecideds in Georgia and North Carolina, which carry a combined 31 electoral votes. Undecided state of Pennsylvania at this point, and then Nevada is still in the up for grabs category. Arizona has been called for Biden, but prematurely.
Yeah.
And there are efforts underway in all of these states, both from a counting standpoint and a legal standpoint, to clarify the vote counts and
get some clarity.
So there are two ways, as it stands right now on the map we're looking at right now, for Trump to succeed. Mm-hmm. Both of those ways require him getting Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Mm-hmm. And then one option would be he gets those three states that you see on the eastern side of the United States and adds Nevada. Mm-hmm. That'll give him 270 plus. Or he does those three states and adds Arizona. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that both of those are precarious tasks at the moment.
Yeah.
So
doable, difficult, but doable, right?
Trump campaign is expressing extreme optimism that they said by Friday the country will know that he's still the president. Mm-hmm. And I think Arizona is a difficult one, just because there's still, and I don't know if you want to go to that next slide there.
Yeah, that's what I think if we go, real detailed here, I think it's better to start with Arizona, because I think that was the one. I know when I was watching and Fox went and called it, I was thinking, what the heck just happened here? So let's get into this and see where we are and what's possible.
Well, I've already been criticized for my slide here, which is justified because there's a lot of content on this slide.
No, it's
but
thorough,
it's complete. So these are the 470,000 votes that are still out there in Arizona and where they exist by county. So I think if you really just focus in on Maricopa being the largest, that is actually, I believe, the largest number of voting members in any county in the U.S. is in Maricopa County, and there are still 282,000 plus out there, and additional 18,000 provisional. So yesterday in the counting that was going on in Arizona, Trump was averaging 57% plus in what was being counted, which was largely from Maricopa, which was very good for him. Unfortunately, of the 470,000 remaining, not all of these are in Republican areas, and some of, like provisional ballots, generally speaking, those are Democratic voters, largely by a significant percentage. So anytime you're looking at provisionals on this, or some of these other counties, like, for instance, Pima County, which is where Tucson is, which is largely Democratic, or Apache, or Coconino, which is Flagstaff, highly Democratic areas, there's still a lot of ballots out there from those areas. Trump needs to, out of this 470,000 remaining votes, continue to get 57% of that to overcome the deficit in Arizona. So that's a tall task. I'm not saying it's impossible, but because he could run a higher margin in Maricopa in the largest percentage of the ballots remaining, above 57%, and make up for any shortfalls that he might have in these other counties with fewer ballots. But that's the task that's ahead of them, as we look at the remaining ballots to be counted in Arizona. So we have a much shorter margin in Nevada, where he's down 7,000 votes. And so the better path for him right now is to hold Georgia, hold North Carolina, win Pennsylvania, and then win Nevada. That gets him the White House, so that he already has.
Right.
So,
back to where we started.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Well, Dan, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the key is if we can get, past Arizona and Georgia and isolate Pennsylvania, where we have the U.S. Supreme Court to back us up, because they're doing all kinds of screwy things in Pennsylvania, because they control, the Supreme Court and the governor and the Secretary of State. And I think Joe DeGeneva described the Pennsylvania Supreme Court as the most corrupt in the United States. Just this morning, I know this will be outdated by the time we do the before this airs, but just this morning, the Trump got an injunction from a judge in Pennsylvania to allow their people into, to watch the ballots being processed, which they were not allowed before, or they were not allowed close access to. And right after that, there was all kinds of news reports saying that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had reversed that judge's decision. But just as and these were from regular news people out there, but then just as we were about to go to the podcast, there was a tweet that came out from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court saying that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has not issued a reversal of that. So what a screwed up situation. I mean, how did all these news people say that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did this and then they didn't do it? So that's the kind of chaos we're already seeing in Pennsylvania. And if we can get this up to Pennsylvania, ultimately with all the chaos and all the shenanigans they're pulling up there, we have the U.S. Supreme Court as a backup. And with a new, justice there, we have a good chance of prevailing on, some really bad fraud, practices that are going on, look like they're going on in Pennsylvania. So that's the aspirational part of this, but we're not there yet, obviously. I'm a little worried about Georgia. Georgia, there's not that many votes left, but, people are sleeping on that a little bit, because that could tip at the last minute, and that would be very problematic for our side.
Mm-hmm. 3 quick points I'd make on what Dan just said. One is, yes, Pennsylvania becomes moot if you don't first get Nevada or Arizona, and you have to hold Georgia and North Carolina. Sure. So, but if we're able to do that, get either Arizona or Nevada and hold Georgia and North Carolina, the Pennsylvania legal battle is a very positive one for us potentially, not just because we now have that 9th member of the Supreme Court, but most importantly because the law is on our side. So, just speaking as a lawyer for a second on this without taking it down a rabbit hole, the issues that are allowing for some of these ballots that are supposedly being segregated from traditional ballots to be considered for counting are things that are not statutory. These are discretionary changes that Secretary of State or local election authorities have tried to make to allow for counting of more ballots that wouldn't count based on the statutory interpretation. So, we believe that if this goes up to a higher court outside of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, I'm not going to call them crooks as Curry was, but regardless of what their politics might be, getting this to the point where you're just looking at the law and looking at it on its face, we like our odds on that one. Mm-hmm. But again, it will be moot if we don't have the numbers in these other states, because then Pennsylvania is just not going to matter on this except for down the ballot races within the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, for sure. So assuming then that the rest does play out, this whole Pennsylvania thing, I'm sure people are listening to you guys talk about it and are thinking, well, how does this play out timing wise?
Right.
What does that look like? Trump campaign saying, oh, Friday we're going to, how does it's very quick, obviously as quick as it can be, but just what's your opinion on timing on all this, assuming we get the other stuff done? What's the Pennsylvania timing?
48 hours, 72 hours.
Yeah, sure.
It could be really quick. So just taking 2000, for instance, I was in Florida for some of that period of time when they were doing recounts in the Gore-Bush race. And, the rulings were coming down from state and federal courts and even the Supreme Court within generally 48, 72 hours of these things being presented to them. Right. And I think you could expect the same, if not more expedited this time around. And it seems like 2000 was so calm by comparison to 2020 and all of this stuff, but it wasn't where I was. And I would remind people that we didn't have the internet and social media in 2000 to the extent that we have right now to be able to sort of amp things up a little bit. And one other point I'll make on this before we jump from this topic is on the Philadelphia lawsuit that Dan referenced regarding poll watchers, money that you directed to the Lawyers Democracy Fund is what resulted in the lawsuit that was filed in Philadelphia to restore these poll watchers to the polling places. So that is money that was directly contributed from Restoration Action to Lawyers Democracy Fund that went for that purpose. Congratulations to you for
congratulations for you for pulling it off.
That is a win. For the Republicans, and it's something that we participated in the funding of.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah,
yep.
It's good to keep up on these things and to do good work, especially in the face of after we went through all we went through to get to where we are. To be able to say, okay, we're participating after the fact when it still hangs in the balance. There's a lot going on up to this point, and now still, I think we're all, everybody's got all kinds of fatigue in 2020. We just need to get past this and get a good result. And if anybody can do it, if anybody can pull this off, it's Trump.
Right.
I look at it, I'm like, wow, that's pretty. It's gonna be tough. That's tough stuff. But he's the kind of guy that you look at what he's been through the last 4 years, and he's steeled and ready for it, right? So we'll see what happens.
And being perfectly honest, just watching a lot of presidents, in recent years or presidential candidates, I think a lot of people on our side feel like if it were George Bush or George W. Bush or Romney or McCain, that they'd be giving Biden tours of the White House right now. But they know Trump's not going down without a fight on this one, and he does have 9 lives. So so don't rule anything out until it's all done.
He does.
One other quick point before we go on: the Arizona situation. If it doesn't have to be, Trump doesn't necessarily have to pull ahead. I mean, if he pulls within 5,000 or something like that, then that's still in play. I know the recounts don't usually change that many votes, but with all the different allegations of fraud out there, as John mentioned before they certify a vote, if they find dead voters, they find irregularities, they can change those votes beforehand. You get down, within 5,000 or something, and you can flip that state. Mm-hmm. So, there's a little bit of a margin of error. Same on the other side, if Georgia or Biden falls short a little bit and they get within, a few thousand, they could flip it the other way. So, it's not an absolute.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I was going to bring up, and we didn't talk about ahead of time, was just voter participation. I'm seeing stuff around, and haven't taken the time to verify every single thing, but you look at the registration as a percentage of participation as the percentage of registration, it's like off the charts. And so that goes to the thing about, okay, well, this mail thing, wow, we really, the Pandora's box on this thing, but is that an indicator then to you guys? If you look at some numbers, there's such a swing, and okay, we've got this many more votes in this state. Is that an obvious sign that there's easier, back to the recount thing? If you only get, 150 votes when you do recount, but in this case, would we get that much more, because we've got this mail thing out there?
We have people who work here right now that are looking into that very thing as we speak. And, it's one of those things where I know the president is kind of a tweet first, and, document it later type of guy. And that's his thing. For us, I think we want to make sure, and there have been a lot of allegations out there. There are, some high-profile, credible news stories that say that Wisconsin's participation was maybe as high as 89%, which would be historic in the modern era for an election. And it probably wasn't, right? So we're looking at individual, returns for not just, a particular county, but for individual precincts within areas that are prone to these types of irregularities. And we're, like many other organizations, going to zero in then on exactly where this occurred and how it could have occurred. And we're going to help people get to the bottom of this. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we're laser focused on that, and we do have, thankfully, good relationships with the Republican National Lawyers Association and the Lawyers Democracy Fund that we've talked about. So we're going to alert them and get their lawyers active on the things that we're spotting as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's there, and it's always there. Dan and I have worked together on enough races that we could tell you, certain areas that are going to produce 102% or 104% of their registered voters, right? And they're consistent on it, and they never seem to be caught, and it continues to happen.
Sure.
Question is how, and I think the point that you raised with us when we were talking about this on Wednesday morning about what to do about what we find from this particular election, you said never again. And I think that has to be the goal for not just Restoration PAC as an organization, but every American, even if you're a Democrat. Fraud hurts everybody, and it might help one side more than another in certain instances. But we need to make sure that we have a system for voting that people can have confidence in, that one vote, one person, that one person, one vote, that principle is legitimate and it's not watered down for either side. If fairness exists for everybody, then we don't have to do this after questioning. And that it affects everything in a negative way. So that's certainly an organizational goal of ours. This year, next year, forever.
Got to keep the confidence up.
The fact that what we saw the last 4 years, the Democrats would do anything, have done anything to undermine President Trump, frame people, indict them, do all kinds, impeach Trump. They did everything, unlawfully, with whatever means possible. To think that were going to play this election, straight and narrow, is illogical. And the key component was to get those mail-out ballots, to flood the zone with all these mail-out ballots. The top-ranking official in Nevada, a Republican official, Laxalt, said that there have been thousands and thousands of mail-in ballots processed in Nevada without any Republicans looking at them. That's the key. These ballots that are being thrown in the drop boxes and everything, they can be from anywhere. I mean, why would they have? I mean, if there's going to be no Republicans looking at these ballots, what's going to prevent them putting in fraudulent, matching up names that are available for them, on the voter rolls and throwing on a fake signature or whatever? I mean, there's nothing to prevent them from it. And John, you have personal experience. Some Republicans I always hear, they say, well, there is bipartisan oversight of these elections. You can monitor and so forth. But the reality is, in these urban areas, you've been a poll watcher, a Republican poll watcher in various urban areas, and they kick you out. They don't let you go in there, even though the law says you're allowed to go in there. So that happens all the time. So, and they know it. It's one-party rule. So it's this mail-out voting is a cancer on our country. It has to stop because there's just no way to monitor it. There's no way to be for us to have any confidence in the results here. And so I think Republicans are finally going to get a little more serious about vote fraud. They talk a good game about it, but they really never do much. And the Democrats spend all their time looking for openings, and they got their opening to do this because of COVID. That was their opening, and that's probably what the difference is in some of these states now. Is these mail out ballots?
Yeah, it feels like they've got a system in place already to be corrupt, and we, shame on us as Republicans, have been too trusting, or it'll be fine. Just a little bit here, a little bit there. But if you let that go long enough, and they build a system around cheating, and I think some of it too, it's like you get your good nature taken advantage of in some ways. It's like, we're on our side. I'm not saying that all Republicans are, but on our side, we're like, hey, what's the right thing to do? It's the moral thing to do. You're not going to disenfranchise and all that stuff. We can never, again, underestimate the amount of stuff that's going on the other side about them trying to figure out how can I take this to the next level, and then this mail thing just fell in their lap, and they say, hey, it's pandemic, this is great opportunity, let's keep Joe in the basement, and then we'll just get the mail out, and then we'll see what happens after the fact, and then stop counting. Yep. It just stinks. The whole thing stinks.
It does, and we're not going to be the party though that spends 4 years whining about this.
That's right.
Like we talked about in our internal discussions, you're never going to, even if you lose a game because of a bad call, you're never going to blame the refs for it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you don't want the game to be close enough that the refs' call could influence it.
That's
and
right.
and so we're going to move forward, and we're going to help to fix this system that's broken by whatever means we have available to us to do so.
Yeah, and let me take your analogy one step further. You can't let the referees change the rules of the game without you knowing that they're changing them, right? And then you start the game, it's like, oh, this is a new rule. I think I used to play with my kids, Axis and Allies. One of my sons was really good at knowing the rules, and none of us were, right? And he pulls something out. Well, it says right there, It's like, oh, it does say right there,
Well, and in all fairness, part of it is that, when Trump's constantly, screaming that the sky's falling, that people, ignore him some of the instances when the sky's actually falling. And he did sound, and we sounded, and every other organization out there, alarms about the potential for fraud that would exist under these circumstances. And still, when they control the mechanisms of government, and I'm not going to get all conspiratorial on you, but there is.
Oh, please do, John.
There is a concerted effort on the other side to make sure that they are electing people to county clerk positions, Secretary of State positions, state's attorney positions. They control the mechanisms to be able to provide discretionary insight into how ballots will be, handled in a variety of ways, from mailing them out to how they're counted when they're received, and if they control all of these things, especially in the larger cities, as Dan was mentioning, in the city of Chicago, your election judges who are appointed, you appoint your Democrats and you appoint your Republicans. And since no Republicans apply and it pays, they appoint Democrats in there who get paid to be Republican election judges. They're not Republicans, they're Democrats. And this happens not just in Chicago, but every major city across the nation, right?
Yeah.
So when a roving attorney like myself shows up in a polling place and asks for information, they then call the police and say, remove this person. They're trying to disrupt voting here. They're trying to disenfranchise voters, or in some ways, discourage people from voting, right? So I've had to go and then get in front of a judge and get back into polling places in many instances. And this is not just my story. This is the story of Republicans who are trying to watch elections all over the country. It is an imperfect system, made less perfect this time by the circumstances, and we are seeing the results of that.
Yeah, we just got.
Well, you can also see. Look at Florida, how many ballots they processed in Florida. They have complete transparency as soon as you vote. As soon as you register to vote, as soon as you cast your ballot, it's online immediately. They were done by 11 o'clock. That whole state, that's what, the third largest state or whatever it is. And, Pennsylvania and Georgia, they just keep finding, they're taking days off. They're, taking pauses. I mean, this can be done right. But when you're thinking of ways to manipulate the system, that's what you get in these democratic states. I mean, there's just no way. Why can Florida do it by 10 or 11 o'clock with more ballots than Pennsylvania? And we're still going in Pennsylvania. We're going to be going for 4 or 5 more days.
Yeah, how about it? And I think as conservatives, too, we always tend to say, well, let's not have a nationwide standard on certain things because you don't want that to get out of control. But it's getting so diffused as far as how this is done. We have to talk about this and get something figured out. And we need the presidency to do that too. So,
but if we don't have the presidency, we still have the Senate.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Right. Well, get the whole thing done one of these days. But yeah, that's right. So, let's talk about the Senate for a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
So I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
So, worst case scenario, we're in a 50-50 scenario, but that's not going to happen. It's going to be 52-48, and we definitely have a slide on this as well somewhere in here. But I think in terms of, we lost a couple seats, and we knew we were going to lose a couple. Right. And we did lose McSally in Arizona, and in Colorado, though I didn't put the name on there, I apologize. That was Cory Gardner's seat that we lost. And then We defeated a Democratic incumbent in Alabama in Doug Jones, Tommy Tuberville, Coach Tuberville, now the newly elected senator there. And then we held the heavily challenged seats in Georgia, where there were two of them. Loeffler's going to be in a runoff on January 5th in Georgia for her seat. It's still debatable whether Sonny Perdue is going to be in a runoff or not. Right now he has 50.6% of the vote. He needs 50% of the vote to avoid the runoff. But even if we get into two runoffs in Georgia, we're not going to lose both of those seats. In fact, we probably will hold both of those seats. And then Susan Collins, despite polling, held her seat in Maine. Steve Daines in Montana. And Tom Tillis, though it's not been called yet, is likely to hold his seat in North Carolina. So that gives us, assuming we hold our two Georgia seats, a 52-48 advantage.
Yeah, great outcome. And we picked up, 6 or 8 or 10 House seats?
Yes, 6 or 8 or 10 is about right, because some of these are still in dispute. I think we all want to take a moment on this program to talk about how excited we are about Jim Oberweis.
Why do you got to do that?
I'm just playing. But he is one of those in the 6 or 8 or 10 scenario.
That's right.
And I think we have another one. Esther King in the Quad Cities in Illinois, who nearly pulled an upset of Sherry Bustos, who was the head of the Democratic campaign committee.
That's right.
This was a huge loss for Pelosi and her team. They were boasting that they thought they might pick up 10 or 12 or 15 seats, and they're going to be down potentially 10 seats.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of good things for Republicans here. And the one thing that I will caution everybody against is, this whole, the world's going to end if Biden ends up being president. I don't want it to happen. Nobody here wants that to happen. But if it does happen, I thought the world was going to end in 2008 when Obama was elected, and largely because he had the House and the Senate.
Yeah, right.
And you know what? We lived through it.
That's right. Barely.
Yep. But the reason we have Senate majorities right now on the Republican side was because he was president for 8 years.
Yeah, sure. Right.
People recognize the importance of us keeping that chamber. And we fought hard here, and we were involved in several of those seats that you saw on the board that we held.
Yeah.
And we darn near got John James over the line in Michigan, and, under different election circumstances in terms of how ballots are being received and counted. John James is probably, the next senator from Michigan right now. But it's unfortunate for him that's not going to be the case. But, understand that court packing and some of these other crazy things that we've heard the Democrats conspiring to do are not going to be possible with, Mitch McConnell running the Senate.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you read the Democratic websites and from the pundits and so forth, they're not particularly happy. I mean, they're happy that they think Trump is going to lose, but other than that, they're pretty gloomy for that outcome, that Trump might be leaving. They seem to be depressed. It's very weird because they know that it was a kind of repudiation of the liberal agenda. The far left agenda was pretty much smacked down everywhere.
Yeah.
It's important to mention, I think, that Trump, like him or loathe him, he put together the most racially diverse group of voters this time that any Republican has in 60 years.
Yeah.
And, that, I guess if we're looking at reasons why, we gave back some of the states that we gave back, well, let's just focus on Michigan and Wisconsin right now and assume that's the case. Just looking at the numbers, I would say, yes, Trump did better with minorities than a Republican has done in 60 years. However, one of the things people forget in all of that is, instead of getting 20% of minority votes, we got 25. You're still losing 75% of the vote. So when turnout is exceedingly high, like it was in this election, and you're losing in that demographic 75% of the votes, you're going to lose those states.
Yeah, the absolute number went up. Yeah.
Right. So that's what. Yeah. If you wanted to look at one factor that was larger than others on why we gave those states back, that's the thing you should look at. And why didn't it happen though? In some other states. Why didn't it happen in Ohio? How did the population bases there not do that? And those are some of the things that have me scratching my head. And we may spend months trying to figure that out. How do you win Ohio by 8 points or whatever it ends up being, and lose Michigan and Wisconsin, or even Pennsylvania, where ideologically there's a lot of similarities, even geographically. And I don't know what the answer is on that part yet. Yeah. So maybe if we get invited back on another podcast, I can bring it back.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Well, one of the things,
go ahead, Dan.
one of the things that has been, we've talked about this before, I know privately, the effect of governors in those 3 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, were all headed by Democrats, and I believe 2 of the 3 were headed by Republicans last time. And with the COVID situation, let's face it, I mean, Trump wins this election easily without COVID, without the pandemic. And, COVID and the media's ability to kind of over scare people about the pandemic, combined with the opportunity that created for them to do the mail ballots, really affected the election. And the mood within those states and the mechanics of the election, but mainly setting the mood within those states were those governors. And those governors created kind of a climate of fear within their states on the pandemic. And that probably shifted the votes more than anything, because those states are a lot more paranoid about the pandemic than, like, say, Florida. I mean, Florida, you would think with all their, their older people there, you would expect that the COVID would definitely affect them more. But with Ron DeSantis and his completely different attitude and actions in that state compared to up north, I think that made the difference.
Yeah, I've been to Florida a couple times. I know you have. It's a totally different place.
Yep.
Especially in Illinois here.
Now the center of the Republican Party, too.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Maybe it should have been all along.
Yeah. One last thing. Polling. How about our guy, Cahaley? Got it right.
Every state that he polled, as far as I can tell, at least right now, looks like he was within the margin of error. And there is, I will count the number of other pollsters that can say that. It's 0.
Yeah, that was easy.
So and so he was a good difference maker for us down the stretch. I think when you brought him in, it helped us to really sharpen our focus. And not to toot our own horn here, but we consolidated all of our resources down the stretch in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, because we knew that's where this was potentially going to be won or lost, and did that far before a lot of other people did. When they were still trying to play a field of 10 or 11 swing states, we were focused on 3. And they're all right there on this one. And so I give you a lot of credit for bringing in Robert and having the foresight to narrow our focus early on so that we could be maximally effective. And win or lose, I'm really proud of what was accomplished this particular cycle, by a small but mighty PAC like ours, that it shows that you don't have to have the most dollars to have the largest impact. You just need to spend them the right way and in the right places, and I feel like that's what our record was this time.
Yeah, for sure. Great work. Any thoughts on Cahaley there, Dan? Is our new friend?
Well, I think he opened a lot of people's eyes. He was out there last time, and all these pollsters got it wrong last time, and they all pledged to do better. They said they're going to go out and talk to regular people, regular folks, and recalibrate and so forth. But then what happened is, like, about a month after the election last time, after all these pledges of we're going to do better, then all of a sudden the Russian collusion hoax came along, and the entire left just said, well, maybe we really didn't lose the election last time. Maybe we were cheated out of it. That was their delusion. And then they just went back and, hired the same people, and they did the same thing. And so I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes twice in a row. They'll probably be hired again because these networks and so forth, they've got a liberal audience and they want liberal polls. That's what they want. It's kind of a form of entertainment or a form of propaganda for them. It's not really, reality, but I don't think they care that much. So I predict we're going to see most of the same crew back next time, but I think there's going to be a new generation of pollsters coming along that use different methodologies.
Yeah, we'll see how they react. I've always thought that. I think I brought it up a couple of weeks ago, that when you're not living in reality, it doesn't make you sharpen, your skills and whatever else. And because the the media in large respect is turned to the marketing arm of the Democrats. The candidates don't have to do much. They just get to push it along. And then if the whole left just believes the lie, it's going to degrade over time. And we're seeing that as the Republicans, we had a good night for the most part. It's the hardest part of this is like Republicans had a good night and we're still waiting on the presidency. So, we'll see how this continues to play out and what they do next. But I agree. So, well, good job, guys. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you back on at a future date. But, there'll be more to talk about.
Okay,
sure.
Sounds good.
All right, very good. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and for supporting conservative media. Don't ever forget, working together and staying diligent, we conservatives can bring our country back to true greatness. Until next time, let's all keep praying that God will continue to bless America.
First Right, a new kind of news summary without liberal slant. Every morning, in your inbox, always free. Subscribe now at restorationofamerica.com/firstright or text First Right to 1-312-820-9167.